The problem in our country is not a lack of taxes. It's a lack of skilled, qualified people giving back their skills and reciprocating education and knowledge in a society. And that's what our side of the house is trying to put forward in today's debate. We see that development is required and community service is a mechanism of the government and of the country using their actively equipped people participating as skilled individuals and giving back into society. I'm going to be dealing with two issues in today's debate. One, the impact of the graduate on the graduate, and secondly, the impact in the context of the country. But firstly, the framework that this side of the house basically stood on today was, one, it doesn't fix society, and two, that it hurts the people. And we've dealt with that sufficiently. One, we showed you how our aim here, obviously a policy doesn't immediately fix society, but it's a good place to start. It's the beginning of change, producing an attitude in people that will contribute to a future development and change in our society, and that's what we need. So now moving on to the first issue, which is the impact of the graduate. So we see that graduates are people who have gained skills and who do have an obligation and can make a significant impact on society. And I'll show you this under three issues. And the first thing that I'm going to deal with is this whole problem that they had was the idea that the person isn't earning. And the idea that a graduate now mopping isn't something that they want to do and isn't productive. But firstly, just dealing with the idea of mopping, we see that this type of community service isn't what we're talking about as we've identified in our policy. Things like mopping and cleaning up the streets are community service that prisoners are doing, not community service that qualified graduates are doing. The community service we're talking about with graduates are where they're utilizing their skills in order to benefit society, not mopping or cleaning the floor. So we see firstly, there's some clarification needed on the definition of earning. Is earning only something that's monetary? Is it something that only deals with money? Or is earning something that involves actively helping the community and earning some sort of a benefit by benefiting your country? We see that earning isn't just money. So we see that the capitalist side opposition needs to change this perspective in today's debate. So we see that they aren't earning money specifically, and so we see under the years of education, and they spoke about how now you're qualified and out of university, and now you aren't earning anymore. But in those years of university, and in those years that you spent studying, you weren't earning any money, assuming that you weren't working. And all we're doing here now is largening or increasing the spectrum of what is education. We're saying that education isn't just sitting in the university receiving lectures, but education is something holistic. So now it's just one more year of education where you don't usually earn if you're not working during being educated, and they're being holistically educated by actively participating in society, being educated on the needs in society, and that's some sort of earning that they actually have. And so we see that social development is something that's needed. Secondly, we see that they are actually earning one in experience, and they seem to have a big disagreement saying that no, they aren't earning any experience because they aren't doing anything to do with their job. But we see that there is something you can do. Yes, a philosopher teaching people. A philosopher teaching isn't actually their profession, but philosophy as an aspect can be put into the minds of young people in rural communities. We see that some philosophical minds can be put forward. We see that an actuarial scientist doesn't need to build a well, but someone who does actuarial can teach people money management and things like that. There's always something you can give back. There's always something you can put forward. And we see that this side of the house needs to change their mindset that there's nothing you can give. They need to broaden their perspective and see that there is something. Where there's a will, there's a way. And secondly, the type of the experience they get is life experience. And that's something we need these educated people to have. Because we see that the problem in our society is a lack of skills reciprocation. And we see the problem and the root cause of this is because people aren't linked to ground level. We see that people aren't linked to the ground level in terms of they don't really have a real life living understanding of what's going on the ground. They may read about poverty, but it's another thing experiencing people, experiencing orphans, and experiencing people who need help and are in dire need. So we see that's another level of experience that they gain. And the third level is that the third level of experience is a type of reciprocating experience into giving. And we see that we want to create people in society that don't only want to be consumers, but also want to be people that give out. We want to create people that are going to give back the education and skill that they earn. And we see that this is something that's extensively needed in these rural communities where there's a lack of education and where there's a lack of skills and involvement from educated people. So secondly, the whole idea that they're unhappy. But before I go there, I'll take Josh.
So if this experience was truly worth it, why would a rational actor not choose to get the experience which benefits them? That is what you don't understand. Provided they are choosing it, it isn't rational for them and it's harming them.
See, the problem that they aren't choosing it is because of the mindset that people have. And all that we're doing now is placing this firstly there. So maybe their perception of this might be different at first, but their perceptions will change. And what we're doing is we're forcefully instilling a value in society and in our youth of our country that will continually further. The problem that you've identified, thank you for that, Josh, is that people don't know that they need to give back. They don't know that it's a rational choice. And now by putting them in a position where they're exposed to a rational choice, we see that further generations will do it. It will cause a circle that will benefit our country forever. And so on the issue of being unhappy, so firstly we need to deal with something about our policy. And they constantly spoke about how location and having a choice, and we didn't state in our policy that they have a choice to work in rich hospitals. That's not something defined as community service. And I was quite disappointed at that. You see that community service is service in places that require it, in services at places that need it. In places like Mahatma Gandhi Hospital, not private hospitals, ladies and gentlemen. So that's just some clarification on our policy. So, firstly, on being unhappy, we see that it doesn't matter if they're unhappy at first, because their unhappiness can change, but the benefit received is a constant, and that will remain. So, and secondly, we see that there's two types of people. One, the people that might be happy doing it, and so we see there's no problem there. And secondly, the people who are unhappy. So we see that because the benefit still exists, we don't really need to change their happiness and make people happy. A lot of people have to do things that they're unhappy about doing in this world. So secondly, the perception of community service can change, and that's another benefit that we need. So on the last issue of paying tax, so what we see here is that the idea of tax is something that's too narrow-minded on the opposition side of the house. We see that the tax being given here is a type of tax that's community service. That's the tax that they're giving. So even if they will be taxed in the future, in the year that they're doing community service, they aren't paying tax, and the tax that they are paying is the type of community service, so they are giving back in whatever way. If they support taxes, that means they concede to the fact that people need to give back to the society, which means that their principle can be applied to this section here. So closing up on that issue and moving on to the next issue of stunting growth, and on the first thing of productivity. And we see the ultimate aim of growth and the effect of the country is that of development. So firstly, on productivity, they say that people will be more productive if they are qualified, doing an active job and giving back. But we see there is a problem that we face in especially developing country, the problem of brain drain. But we see what happens here is that if people are forced to do 1 year of community service, that they aren't allowed to immediately leave the country, taking their skills away from the country, but they're forced to be retained and actively utilizing their skills for the country. So we see preventing brain drain is something that productivity will be ensured by. So secondly, the idea of motivation. We see that people need intrinsic motivation, and if there's someone that's so easily unmotivated, then that's a problem and that must change. But secondly, we see that they can still do what they love, so motivation still exists on that level. And secondly, motivation, and thirdly, motivation, we need a motivational shift. We need a motivational shift in people, seeing that motivation to be successful mustn't be the primary motivation in life, but a motivation to develop society and a motivation to give back to your country. So we see we want a motivational shift in that. So, in closing up, we see that the only way to ensure development in our country is to ensure that our skills is reciprocated, is to ensure that our people have values instilled in them that will carry out them throughout life. Success isn't everything, ladies and gentlemen, but living up and giving to a community can change your life.